everyone, my name is Lara, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you all how I turned this into this lovely gorgeous top for a concert I went to last month. So if you are interested in seeing how I was able to accomplish this thrift flip, keep watching the video. Hello, YouTube world. Please don't mind the background. I'm still trying to figure out the best filming setup for my sewing videos. It's a work in progress, okay? But needless to say, this is the original piece that I am working with. Funny story about this thing is basically it was Halloween of my junior year of college. Me and my friends Tiara and Lindsay, actually it was in a vlog, we dressed up as fairies for Halloween, and Miss Tiara thrifted our outfits, and my outfit for my fairy costume came with this I don't even know what you would describe it as, just an over shawl thing. I did wear it the first time I saw Ravenna, which is also in another one of my spring semester recap vlogs. And was it an amazing, beautiful time? Yes, absolutely. And do I want to rewear the same exact thing, but just in a more elevated, mature way? Yes, absolutely. In its current state, I feel is not really giving the way I want it to give, and it's also very hard to style, and I'd love to turn it into something that I can actually wear on a night out or something like that. So for starters, the biggest thing I want to do is actually make sure it fits my body, because it is quite large for me. And then I want to have it end as a shirt. So I'm gonna obviously shorten it. I'm gonna take in the sides so that it's more fitted. And then with the extra fabric, I think I'm going to add another layer to the bottom and have it be tiered, and then potentially add ruffles all around the border of the top. That is the current vibe for what we're going for right now, and this is the before look. So here I am carefully deconstructing the duster, which, yes, fun fact, I ended up finding out what this garment is called, and it's called a duster, which just feels so weird to say. It just does not feel like it would be called a duster. But anyways, I figured instead of boring you all with instructions on what I did to complete this thrift flip, I would instead have a nice, fun little chat with you all. So, fun fact, if you saw my May vlog, which by the way, if you have not seen it, I would totally recommend you go watch it, you would know that I went to go see Ravenna in concert that month, and that was the event that I was making this thrift flip for. Ravenna is one of my absolute favorite artists ever. I feel the best way to describe her music is relaxing, euphoric R&B, and honestly, to be honest, if you're spending a lot of time in nature, I 12 out of 10 would recommend putting her music on. I personally discovered her in a really interesting time in my life, because it was back in the summer of 2022 when I was working a conservation landscaping job, which essentially is just fancy words for high stakes gardening. So needless to say, I spent a lot of time, aka 40 hours a week outside maintaining gardens, removing invasive species, and planting plants that summer. And while at this job, we were allowed to listen to music while we worked, which was perfect because I spent most of my summer doing deep dives on so many different artists, Ravenna being one of them. Now, her beautiful, euphoric music was the backdrop to a lot of essential lessons I learned that summer. One of them being that I have a deep-rooted phobia of frogs and toads. All right, thrift flip update. This is the current state of the thrift flip. It's very boxy and I want it to just be more fitted. So what I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the shoulders in a little bit more.
I think I'm gonna cut the sides open and take out more from the sides. And then like once I get a final armhole, then I will adjust the sleeves and add the sleeves back in. This seems like a pretty simple thrift flip, but the thing that's making me a little bit nervous is to start sewing because I don't want to potentially F this up. That's the one risky thing about thrift flips is like, you really only get one shot. And if you mess up, so, okay, that's my debrief for now. We're gonna start by taking in the sides of this.
Anyways, back to what I was saying. One of the most stark lessons I learned that summer was that I have a deep phobia of frogs and toads. And here's the thing, I've always found them to be a little weird and unsettling, and I've always kept my distance from them. But naturally, when you're working shoulders deep in foliage, it's inevitable that you will interact with a frog or a toad at least once. And I had this one specific toad interaction that really catapulted my fear from being just a casual, silly little quirk into the monster it is morphed into today, which is a deep-rooted phobia. Basically, there was one day on the job where we were maintaining a garden, and what garden maintenance looks like a lot of the times is pulling out weeds and invasive species from the garden. And so this occurred on my first week on the job, so I was still pretty unfamiliar with identifying plant species, and if you've worked with plants before, you will know that it can sometimes be pretty hard to distinguish between a native species and an invasive species if you don't have a trained eye for it, because at the end of the day, everything just looks like a green plant. Everything has leaves, everything has a stem, everything has a vine. So naturally it can be a little bit hard. However, what I did to combat this was just to focus on removing one invasive plant at a time. And so the plant I was focusing on in this scenario was called Creeping Charlie. And it was a pretty satisfying plant to remove because the roots didn't have such a strong hold in the ground and it was like a vine. So once you pulled out part of the plant, you could essentially pull out the rest of the plant, and it was kind of like removing a long piece of string from the dirt.
Hello, sewing update. I have officially fitted the sides and now the official size fits me so much better. Who would have thunk? This is what it looks like right now, and honestly, to be honest, as a vest, I think this actually looks really cool. And part of me is like, what if I just kept it as a vest? But I'm going to stick to the vision and continue on with the sleeves. But yes, this is the update right now.
Hello, Cozy Ravina Thrift Flip Vloggity Vlog video. Check-in time. It is officially day 2 of me working on this project. I actually have a very busy day today because, fun fact, I'm flying to Toronto tomorrow in the morning and I have not started packing yet. That's on me to figure out and navigate on my own, but for today's portion of the thrift flip, all I want to do is attach the sleeves to the final piece. So yes, that is where we're at right now. Boom. Anyways, the garden we were working on was very overgrown, and I was doing the classic Asian squat while working in the garden. So the plant level was at my shoulders. Like, I literally was not joking when I said I was shoulders deep in foliage. So I'm minding my business, removing the Creeping Charlie, listening to Ravina. I could not have been more content in that moment until I stumbled upon what I thought to be a pile of reddish brown animal poop with white spots, which immediately stopped me in my tracks. However, until further inspection, I realized to my absolute horror that that was not animal poop, but instead the biggest, fattest, most unsettling looking toad I had ever seen in my life. Not only was this thing massive in size, like larger than my hand, it was also adorned with white spots and bumps and white lines on top of this reddish brown skin. And I had no idea, by the way, that toads could be red. Fun fact, they can be red. I didn't know that, and I didn't know that they could have white spots. Little did I know. Crazy to think about. Nature is wild. But anyways, what made matters even worse was that if I had not been paying closer attention to my surroundings, I would have full on grabbed this toad, just hand on the toad. And that's a thought that keeps me up at night even now to this day. Hello, sewing vlog. I am back with an update. For you guys, it was probably like 1 second. For me, it's been a couple of days since I've gotten back into this project. This is gonna be the same vibes as my February vlog because it is actively 10:15 p.m. right now, and I have the delusion that I'll be able to finish this project by the end of the night tonight. Let's freaking go. Yes! I am delusional. But also, fun fact, that concert is tomorrow. Why the frick did I do this to myself? I don't really know. Anyways, I don't really have much left to do except to hem the bottom layer. And when I hem the bottom layer, I think I'm gonna just do a zigzag stitch with a really short length and also a short width, mainly because the zigzag stitch will hopefully give it a nice little lettuce hem, if you will. And then I also want to add a ruffle all along the border and then add the bottom layer to add more dimension. Those are 3 things, and I feel pretty confident that I could do that by tonight. Fingers crossed. We'll see what time I finish this. I'm feeling confident though, and with that, let's freaking go. So needless to say, my euphoric gardening bliss was so rudely interrupted by a sight, by a creature so grotesque and unsettling that not only did it throw me off, it awakened this deep phobia in me that I quite honestly had no idea existed until that moment specifically. And so naturally, I freaked out, I screamed bloody murder, and ran out of that garden as fast as I possibly could. Again, mind you not, this was my first week on the job, and I didn't know any of my crewmates that well, so naturally I did get clowned on for my freak out over the toad for the rest of the summer, and I accepted that. But what was worse, besides seeing the toad and potentially touching it, was watching my crewmates from afar trying to remove the toad from the garden and watching this giant thing hop. Holy shit, was it was so huge, and it not only freaked me out, but it also freaked out some of my other crewmates as well. And honestly, to be honest, was this a dramatic story? Possibly. Is it irrational to have a deep-seated phobia of frogs and toads? Yes, I fully understand this. I know that they are not harmful and they can be good for the environment, except for the invasive cane toad in Australia. That's where I draw the line. And I understand as a certified eco-girly to respect them because they bring a lot of value and ecosystem services to the habitats that they inhabit. However, I just would strongly prefer to never have to interact with a frog or a toad, and that is simply my truth. It is deeply unfortunate that with Maryland summers comes the occasional rain and thunderstorm, and you know what lurks out at night after a summer rain? The fucking frogs. The fucking frogs. I find it deeply unsettling and awful, and that's also my truth. So frogs and toads, I respect them. I understand their importance. They just make me uncomfortable. And I have a deeply rooted, emotional, almost spiritual phobia of them. And was this entire tangent completely irrelevant to the thrift flip? Maybe. Back to the thrift flip. Here's what the final product ended up looking like.